Good afternoon and welcome to East Devon District Council's Audit and Governance Committee on the 21st September 2023. I am the Chair Councillor Sam Hawkins and I would like to welcome anyone watching the meeting via the live streaming. Any members of the public who want to view the agenda can do so by visiting the website www.eastdevon.gov.uk. We will now start the meeting by doing a roll call of committee members here present. It's your matter.
Starting with yourself, Chair. Councillor Hawkins.
Present.
Councillor Goodman.
Present.
Councillor Audit.
Present.
Councillor Levine.
Present.
Thank you. You are quorum, sir.
Thank you. Agenda item or minutes of the previous meeting. If anyone has any comments on the set of minutes from the 27th of July 23, please do this by raising your hand. As I see no raised hands, I will take this as an indication of 3 minutes of the previous meeting. Thank you. Agenda item 2, apologies. Back to you, Amanda.
Right, I have apologies from Councillor Burrock, your Vice Chair, Councillor Gazzard, Councillor Haggerty, Councillor Bloxham, Councillor Fitzgerald and Councillor Nicholas.
Thank you. Agenda item 3 is declarations of interest. Given the members here, if anybody does have a declaration, please raise your hand. And obviously if anything crops up during the meeting, feel free to declare it. Agenda item 4, public speaking. There are no members of the public registered. Agenda item 5, late items. There are none. Agenda item 6, confidential items. There are none. Agenda item 7 is the internal audit plan 23-24 swap, and that's over to Lisa.
Thank you very much, Chair. So my first item today is the internal audit plan for the second 6 months of the year. So at East Devon we've moved to producing 2 audit plans a year to keep the plan as current as possible. I'll also say that it still will be a flexible plan, so we still can add audits as and when required to this plan. So it very much is a live document. As I'm fairly new to East Devon, I took the opportunity over the summer to meet with all of the assistant directors to get to know a little bit better about the services that they were responsible for, and together we talked about risks and agreed a schedule of audit work for the next 6 months, which makes up this plan today. I found that a really helpful exercise, and actually audits that came out of those meetings go beyond the next 6 months. So it's going to give us a really good start for the audits for the next financial year too. So we're still following very much a similar approach. It's our risk-based approach. So we're very much conscious of trying to make sure that we are considering those strategic risks as well as things like corporate priorities and SWOT. We keep up to date with sort of like national issues, so we're making sure that those are considered as well. And from that, the plan for the next 6 months, it builds on what the work that we've already done, and I think altogether does mean that over the year that there is a plan that covers important core areas as well as a breadth of audits across the services, and does pick out a lot of those strategic risks at the council. The actual detail of the plan can be found in Appendix A. So I've tried to give a very brief explanation of why the audit is going to take place, and also links to the strategic risk register where that's applicable. I'm happy to answer any questions that
Thanks, Lisa. I just want to touch on Appendix A. Supplier resilience has moved from Q1 to Q4 to enable contract register to be prepared. But I just think there's a couple of our suppliers that are probably quite key, and if they fall over, would have quite a material impact on the council. If the station provider falls over, we can run down staples if we really need to, but if, for example, picking an example out of the air, I don't know, hypothetically, let's say, leisure provider struggling with their finances and some pandemic came along and struggled, that would have quite a material impact on the council. So I wonder if there's some of the high risk element that can remain in Q1 where we know the contract exists, and appreciate that some of the lower risk areas remain in the Q4 to help with workload.
Yeah, Gaz, I certainly remember that. We did actually have initial meetings, so we agreed a brief and a programme of work, but what we wanted to do is to select a sample of contracts, and the best place to do that would be from the contracts register. So still work was being done to make sure that that was complete and accurate, so that's why we agreed to wait a bit. But if Simon's in agreement, we can bring some of that audit forward again.
Simon?
So I can. We can look at that certainly, but I think from memory when we had a discussion with I forget the name of the auditor involved, but we had looked at our key contracts fairly recently in terms of housing, LED, Suez. I think those we felt were quite well controlled, and we looked at those. Whereas what we're interested in is the ones below that, just to make sure that contract management was strong through the council as a whole. So I think that was the thinking of, we can double check, Chair, to make sure that is the case, that we have looked at those fairly recently, the big ones. And I think that's the reason we put it back, to look at the lower ones.
Yeah, that's fine. I just don't remember it being focused on the resilience piece, but
Okay.
again, that could very easily could be my memory. So, yes, please.
Sorry, just, I don't know if it's the right place for this or not, but with the problem later on in our agenda where it comes to talk about the voids and the problem that's having with our budget, possible 1.2 million, I think that might be linked to. Is that something that we should be looking at as a possible risk? And that's to do with what Sam has just said there about the contractors looking at that and all the rest of it, as to whether that could affect the council in a serious thing. And regardless of whether they fail, they seem to be failing anyway.
I know we have had some work in this area. I can't remember whether it would pinpoint that precise point.
So you said the management of voids.
Council houses.
Yeah.
So I imagine it would be if the voids are there because of inaction or inappropriate action.
It certainly is something that's sort of audited in other places, because I only joined in April. I'm not familiar with all the history. I mean, I could definitely look into it after this meeting and let you know how recently it was done.
Yeah, I think it's a very valid point.
Yeah.
We just need to find out what exactly the answer is. If it's one of those that's been looked at recently and it's still going through the unpicking, obviously it's never been looking at it again too soon. But
I think it's one of the few things in the accounts that sort of jump out to me. At
Yeah.
1.2 million possible loss by the end of the year, it's a colossal amount for something that really is one of our primary objectives, is to supply houses to
yeah, it is a significant risk probably to HRA, that's where it sits. But that doesn't change where this team.
Through the Chair, I think that's a really valid point, and in terms of highlighting areas to look at, and that's linking in with the finance report as well. If we could just come back, we can do this outside the committee if you like, because we just need to double check what we have covered off and when, because as you say, as the Chair's saying, there could be a list of recommendations that are being worked through at the moment. Either we bring that back to your next meeting, or and then raise, I think there's a lot of nod around the room in terms of this is an area that ought to be incorporated in the plan if it hasn't been recently, is perhaps the way to pitch it.
Yeah, I think that's
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Audit.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to query, I thought we agreed at the previous meeting on a review of record-keeping policies and compliance with those policies, which was to go into the Q3 audit plan. And I don't see that here, so I just wondered what was going on with it. Thank you very much.
Lisa?
I think that's because there is actually an audit that we're doing at the moment that covers those issues. It's called Information Governance Policies, and it's in the Q1 plan. It's actually being drafted at the moment. So the next meeting we have, that one will be final for members. And we compared what members were asking for in terms of the audit, and we've covered whether all policies are expected, are in place and are up to date. We've looked at retention policies and compliance with those retention policies, and we've looked at the training in place to support staff in respect of all those policies and retention. So we felt, you know, that covered it, and it was already in progress.
Thank you. Yeah, because I just remind myself that Appendix A is only Q3 and Q4 of next year, so I didn't want to exist. It's just not on that appendix. Councillor Dillon.
Yeah, just for accuracy, and you might think it's validity, but under the waste contract extension, it says a 3-year contract extension starts in autumn 23-24. Currently, that's not the case, because it still hasn't gone through cabinet. It was discussed at the waste board on Tuesday, but it's not gone through. It will be subject. I'm sure it will go through, but it should be subject to cabinet, I would just suggest.
No, I think it should be updated, presumably,
Yes.
as they proposed extension.
Yeah.
I think that's.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. If you've got any other comments or questions, otherwise, Councillor Audit.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, so speaking more generally, rather than to anything specifically in Appendix A, and picking up on Councillor Barlow's point, perhaps going back to some of the discussion we had about dashboarding and communication at the previous meeting, is there a straightforward way for us as members to be able to see what has and hasn't been done and when, on a sort of a live basis, looking historically? That was very waffly, I apologise, but hopefully the point made.
I think the answer is on modern.gov app. There's the councillor library. Within that, I know several of these have been saved. So they go into more detail when it comes to this committee on the point that we don't need the detail at committee level, but it is for members to see. Please correct me if I'm wrong there, but
Yes, and I will definitely make a point after this session to make sure it is up to date with all files from this year. Yeah.
But yeah, I think that only started 2 or 3 years ago, so if it's further back than that, they may not be there, but it's definitely a going forward thing. Thank you. If I don't see any other hands, the committee is being asked to approve the internal audit plan. So there's been a couple of minor changes, but I don't think they are such that in the proposed element. I don't think they're fundamental changes. So subject to our discussions, if I can ask members then to vote in favour to approve this report. Thank you. On that basis then we'll move on to agenda item 8, which is the internal audit activity progress report. I'll hand that to Lisa. I just wanted to ask, you mentioned, I know you circulated to the members about the benchmarking report that didn't hit our agenda, but it seems to be positive news. Feels like an appropriate that maybe this could be mentioned. Sorry if I've stolen your thunder.
Yeah, so at the last audit committee meeting, I had a question from a member to ask in terms of the opinion given to East Devon and the supporting reports, where did East Devon fit? So I didn't have that off the top of my head, so I went away and I've done a piece of work and I circulated that to members at the beginning of the week. Sorry, it took a bit of time with holiday and things over the summer. But yes, so in terms of opinion, a reasonable opinion was given overall, and that was sort of the same as the majority of our swap partners. And then I compared the individual report opinions, and I converted it to percentages to make it comparable. And East Devon, fell well within the norm compared to the other partners. And then finally, I thought it'd be interesting to see the high corporate risks that have been reported across the partnership. So I did an analysis of that. In 22-23, East Devon did not report any we didn't pick up any high corporate risks from our audit reports. But there were others across the partnership where there had been some, up to 3. And I gave you the detail of what they are, and that was actually really important to me, because it could be a good checklist, when we actually come to planning, to see how we considered things that other partners have actually reported as high corporate risks. So that piece of work was a value to me also.
Great, thanks. And then, yes, we've got the progress report. Did you want to touch on
Yeah.
that?
Yeah, so this is the regular progress report, and it's reported how things were at the beginning of September. So the main reason for a progress report is to obviously give you an update of where we are in terms of the internal audit plan and to highlight any areas of concern which are typically those lower assurance opinions. So the internal audit at a glance page, on page 21 is our overall summary, and you can see there that 2 assurance audits have been finalised in the period. They were limited assurance reviews, and there's more detail later in the report that I will touch on. I'm happy that progress overall is reasonable compared to the Q1, first half plan that we agreed, with 69% of audits at least in progress, and that was the beginning of September, and since that time we've progressed that figure further still. I'd also want to point out that you can see from this that, as I said, that this is a live document, and in the first 6 months we've had requests to add 2 audits to this plan, and as a consequence I have shifted a couple back as well, so that we've got the resource to be able to deliver that. I also thought this time that it might be of interest and of help to start to build up a comparison of our audit work with the strategic risks. So I produced a table for the progress report that gives you that. That's on page 23. And then, as I said, we have 2 limited assurance opinions in the period, and there's more detail of those starting on page 26. So that's the emergency planning audit. I have to say that for that one, the weaknesses had already been identified by the council, so that audit was really welcomed by us, because they wanted to make sure there wasn't anything else to add to that. So we carried out our work, all the findings have been agreed, the timescale set, and in fact the service has asked us to go back in Q4 to revisit this to show that they have actually implemented all these findings, so that was really positive. And then the other one was the agency and consultants, the implications of IR35. This is a new audit in the plan, so we were requested to carry out this audit because there were concerns that the existing processes in place were a little outdated. Once again, that this report and the actions recommended have been agreed in full, and we have full cooperation with this audit, and all the findings identified. We actually did some follow-up work that I've also summarised if you move to the next page or 2. So in the 22-23 plan, we did an audit with us as housing landlord looking at health and safety compliance in respect of asbestos. That was a positive follow-up, that all the findings that we found to be at least in progress. Those remaining ones, we have an action tracking process where we ask managers every couple of months where they are with their recommendations. So those ones that still remain in progress, we will continue to monitor through to completion. So that we were pleased that improvements were evident. The data quality and completeness of the asbestos register had greatly improved since the original audit. And as I say, there was just some in progress that we will continue to follow up. And then secondly, we did a follow-up of our disability facilities grant and better care fund work, and virtually all of the actions that agreed had been implemented. There were just the minor ones remaining in progress, so that was very good indeed. And so we can give assurance that the risks that were apparent in that original audit have now been significantly reduced. And then moving on, there's a full summary of the audit work that makes up that first half year's plan. Again, happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. I did want to touch on the IR35 issue, given that there were 6 priority 1 recommendations, and also the potential for that. So I don't know if you can kind of progress that's been made.
Certainly, Chair. So, as Lisa was saying, it's one that myself and the HR manager were concerned about, the risks involved. So we did ask for an urgent audit in that area just to help us get the processes and procedures in place. Most of it falls within HR's remit, but we, as Lisa was saying, we've agreed all the recommendations and we're partway through implementing those. And the good thing about raising it through the audit process is that this committee gets highlighted and you get follow-ups as well, which sort of should give you that reassurance. So we are working through those recommendations.
Are we anticipating any consequences for sort of misclassified workers today?
We are putting everything in place urgently. So those particular areas of concern where individuals, perhaps the records weren't on file, where IR 35 assessment hadn't been made, has been done. So if we get an audit now, we're good. But it's whether when they if it's identified the past, I couldn't say.
Thank you. That would be useful to understand the implications when they're known.
Well, there are no implications until they're identified by
Well, yeah,
HMRC.
so, well, it's for us to self-report to HMRC, isn't it?
I don't believe so. If we're up to date and we've
I think,
Yeah, I
that's
see
my
what you're
question.
saying,
If
Chair.
we've
We have
classified, we should report
Yeah.
to HMRC.
and I don't think we have,
Right.
but I'll confirm that to you. I see what it's.
I've had my turn. Does anybody else want to?
Yeah, just
Councillor Goodman.
yeah. One on asbestos. When I read what you said, the original order was completed in March 23 and reviewed a limited assurance opinion. The object of the audit was to provide assurance that all council-owned properties are safe and compliant with asbestos policy and legislation. When you read your the next 2 points, you don't actually say that all properties are. Do we take it all properties are now safe, or are the council working towards it?
So it's a follow-up audit, so we carried out the full audit in 22-23, agreed a series of actions to reduce the risks by weakness in that sort of control framework. And so it's a limited scope follow-up audit, so it just takes those follow-up actions and the actions and obtains evidence that those actions have been implemented. So that's what I report on. It's actually then sort of to be able to give assurance, I'd have to go back and do a full audit again, because I say it's only limited to where those were actions, with those weaknesses. So if things have moved on since the audit has taken place, that could affect things, couldn't it? So I don't feel it's easy to say, well, actually now I would be able to give that assurance. If nothing else had changed, you could, but that isn't the case, is it?
If I remember correctly with this one, I believe, I might be wrong, that the issue was the houses were safe, but the paperwork wasn't there to support that. So that was the fundamental issue here, was the right piece of paperwork where they needed to be in folders. It's a bit like think health and safety in kitchens. You have a completely clean kitchen, but if they can't find the folder saying you cleaned it at 10 o'clock this morning, you didn't clean it at 10 o'clock this morning. But maybe we can get someone from the housing team just to confirm that point by email to members after this meeting. That would be helpful. Because I don't want to say I've completely misremembered that.
No, Chair, I only mention that because it was quite specific here. It's about making sure these properties are safe. And I think the service, I'm sure, the new lead is on the case, just having some assurances that our properties are safe. I think it's important for this community.
Yeah, I agree.
And for our residents.
Of course. We don't have any other questions. Is the committee then happy to note this report? We can take a vote, that'd be great. Thank you. Then we'll go on to agenda item 9, the audit approach report and sector update from Grant Thornton, and I'll hand it to Jackson.
Thanks very much, Chair. Good afternoon, members. It's a fairly short report from us today. It's one that you see on every agenda, covering progress against our statutory responsibilities, so financial statements, audits, and also value for money work, as well as any sector updates or publications of interest. If I move to page 35 of the agenda pack, so this is entitled Progress at September, and that takes those two areas of our statutory responsibility. So we talk the accounts first, so we continue on the 2021 financial statements, so we've discussed this a number of times at previous committee. We've also brought two findings reports in respect of that financial year of audit. When we drafted this, we've recently received responses from finance colleagues on the final remaining queries that we had to conclude that testing. We're working through those, as it says here. We're hoping to finalise that this month, although looking at the dates, this month there's not much left of it, and I appreciate there's lots of people who have to sign lots of different documents. So if it weren't done by the 29th, which is next Friday, I envisage it's the first week or two of October. So by the time we come to the November committee, that's the next scheduled committee, my intention is that audit is signed and concluded. We've had previous delegation to the chair, so Councillor Hawkins has previously got delegation to approve that set of financial statements from those previous reported findings, and there's been no materials or any significant changes to the set of draft accounts that have come before this committee previously either, which is why we are suggesting that we wouldn't bring it back again through committee, because it's been considered by members already and that delegated approval has been given. I'll hold on and talk about the audit backlog points, because there's a couple of reports later in the agenda. If I move over to value for money, so we were talking 2021 for the accounts audit. We've issued our auditor's annual report, or indeed an interim auditor's annual report on 2021. That's again been previously considered by A and G. That has to remain interim until I issue an opinion on the accounts. I can't issue that as a final report until the accounts opinion is issued. I'm not intending that report will look any different to what it did in terms of its interim iteration. So that report has been issued. We've also previously reported on a risk of significant weakness, so that's the terminology that's set out in the National Audit Office's guidance to all external auditors around governance arrangements. This is in respect of the 21-22 audit year. So we've undertaken a significant amount of work in this area. We've had draft findings for a little while, but we are discussing those with various stakeholders, because clearly I want to make sure that what we say and the information that we have is complete and accurate. Earlier this month I received some more information which I've been considering with a view that will make its way into our final report, which will come to November. I appreciate previous meeting my colleague Beth said we were bringing it to this meeting. That extra information has made me just wait for a moment and consider that piece of information before I'm in a position to finalise that report. That's 21-22, and then 22-23. So the year ended not as well, just to be clear. We're moving around in time somewhat. That work is due to kick off imminently, and we've discussed that with Simon and Melanie, his monitoring officer, at our last catch-up earlier this month. That's a brief update on what's been happening since we last met as a committee. The final 3 pages then of our report, so 37 to 39, set out a bit more information. As you appreciate, we were talking about financial statements for a year ended 31st of March 2021. This sets out a bit more context on the level of delay that is around the country in respect of financial statements audits, and not just East Devon. A couple of pages on a Grant Thornton report that's been produced, and that on page 37 also sets out the percentages of audits that were delivered by required timescales, which you can see drastically fell off from 95% in 16-17 to just 9% in 2021. So this is a national issue that we've discussed here historically, but further information that we've done as Grant Thornton, not on East Devon, this is a national report. And then the final page, 39, sets out some proposals that are being discussed to possibly help address some of these delays. So DLAC, Department of Environment, Housing and Communities, has been consulting with a number of bodies and individuals around potential ways to address some of this backlog. One of the ways is being referred to as what's known as a backstop, and effectively what this is saying is there will be set dates in the future, and if an audit of financial statements for the years weren't completed by those set dates, auditors would issue qualified opinions on those sets of accounts. There would be standard wording to say why they were being qualified, and then we would move on to future sets of financial statements. The other area of potential consultation, I mentioned the National Audit Office earlier, so the Code of Audit Practice sets out the work that we are required to do. There's consideration being made to the level of work, certainly for financial statements audits, and some of the key estimation balances, land and building valuations, pension valuations. We spend a lot of time talking about those, we spend a lot of time auditing those, Simon and colleagues spend a lot of time responding to our queries on those. When ultimately we sit here and the set of accounts that's produced with those balances don't impact your general fund. So there's frustration, I think it's fair to say, on the behalf of auditors, accounts preparers, dare I say, property valuers, who get paid by external auditors. So there's consideration of reducing the level of work that is expected of an external auditor in those areas. Both of those are proposals at the moment, so clearly they're not in place. So until I or we or local auditors hear otherwise, we continue under the arrangements that we're under. But I thought it was important to put those two documents in today, given, as I said, we're still talking about 2021. We'll then move on to 21-22. We're already halfway through the 23-24 financial year, so external audit of financial statements here at East Devon, but elsewhere around the country is years behind where we currently are. And as you see in the press at the moment, there's lots of other councils facing significant financial challenge. One of the areas that can provide some assurance to members, stakeholders, the public is external audit of financial statements. So it is key that this is caught up as quickly as possible. Sorry, I've done quite a lot of talking today, so I'm going to stop now and ask questions or comments.
No, thank you for that. I'm just going to start back to front thing. The changes to the code of audit, they do sound sensible. I won't repeat all points, but at the end of the day, a set of accounts is meant to be useful for the stakeholder, the taxpayer. They don't need to know the change in value of buildings in the same way they need to know the other elements. They say revenue account is accurate. The statutory deadline backstop makes me a bit nervous, just from a public perspective. If you issue several hundred qualified audit accounts, they become meaningless, or it starts to hide issues because you go, oh, everyone's qualified. We've overlooked now this big issue, whereas a qualified audit account is meant to be a big deal, and I think it will distract massively from that, but obviously it does need addressing. I think it would be helpful for members, the table on your page 6 or page 37, if we could have our position just recorded. I know you've gone through it just now, but it's very quick, it's easy to forget where we're at. Yeah. Just as a one table summary updated. The 20, I'll get the dates right, 22, 23, which is obviously the year we just had. If I roll forward this table, suggests unaudited would be August 23 publication, audited would be November 23. So is that the paper target?
So the deadlines have changed again for 22-23. So the deadline for publication of draft accounts was the end of May 23. The target for completion of audits is 30th of September 23. And on your points around the East Devon clarification, I'll do that via email if that's okay.
Yeah, it's really helpful.
Yeah.
It's getting confusing having
Oh,
three
no, I agree, yeah.
sort of life periods. But I appreciate, obviously, we've discussed the length of reasons why. Members, do you have any questions? Councillor Audit?
Thank you, Chair. So I had a look at the report that the report in turn mentions, and specifically some checklists, if you like, for local council audit committees in terms of how we can assist, support, improve the system. Do we have any plans to kind of address that as a committee? I know, for example, the last bullet point, I'm looking at page 24 of, what's it called, of about time. The question there, is there a timetable with clear accountabilities in place for resolving delays? For example, I don't know the answer to that question. It seems to me that there's a number of points in there that we might consider acting on to improve our management of this process.
Thank you. Yeah, I've had a look through these points myself. I know some of them we're working our way through, just because I'll take the first one as an example about training for ourselves. Obviously, we're a new committee in terms of membership. There is currently the SWOT questionnaire that's gone out. Everyone in this room has completed it, but also not everyone in the committee has yet completed it. So we're just chasing that up, and SWOT can then take that forward for what training needs we need, as well as the piece then on the independent person, which will hopefully plug some of that gap. I don't mind, I won't go through every individual point, but just as an example, there is a working way through that, but take on board the point, the last bit around the timetable. Jack, if that's what you can comment on.
So, I think this helpful checklist, I wonder if it's worth me and Simon having a conversation on some of the points that are relevant to our relationship. There's obviously points raised to audit committee members, which has training within one. So if we go through and I provide a response to the areas that are relevant to myself or Simon, and I discuss that, and we either bring that through next committee or again circulate a short response just to say, for East Devon specifically, we've considered all these points and these are the responses and what is happening.
Yeah, I mean, just to come back very quickly on that, I think given that this is an important area, as Councillor Cooper was saying earlier, this is obviously going to be of concern to our residents, to our taxpayers. Could we have a report on that? Doesn't need to be a chunky one. I'm conscious I don't want to create more work. However, I am creating more work. It sort of seems like it would be good to have something formal that's public facing as well on that.
Yeah, I think that's something that can come forward. It might be worth Lisa being involved on having some input into that conversation as well. We've got to try and
We'll schedule it in.
sorry, forward plan.
Forward plan, yeah.
Councillor Goodman.
I totally agree with what's been said. I think something that's resident facing would be really useful. Some residents will be concerned with it as well, but I think we should be telling people those things. The only question I've got is that, Jan, going back to what you said about the low money that we now come in November, that's disappointing, but we are where we are. Last year, when did that same report come to this committee? If this one's going to come in November, when did it come the previous year?
That's a very good question. I'm going to have to frantically look through some of my files.
All right, don't worry about it now, but if the chair can know, because I think it's important to know, is there been a delay, what's the reason? Because I think that's important. Because the thing about audit is it's a time thing, isn't it? If there's an issue, we want to deal with it. If you get it 6 months, 4 months, 5 months too late, we could have been putting things right earlier. That would be my point.
Yeah.
Thank you. Agreed.
Yeah, I want to say it's probably over 12 months.
I think it's over 12.
Well, late, it's probably all maybe not.
Since the last report.
Since that, yeah.
I'll go back through to work out exactly which committee was discussed at. Because I'll have different iterations of drafts, but the one we've made Yeah,
There will be a set of minutes with the date on
yeah,
that.
absolutely. I just need to go through and remind myself of which meeting that was.
Of course, thank you. Any other comments? If not, are members happy then to note this report? Thank you. And then it is agenda item 10, financial monitoring report 23-24, and that's over to you, John.
Thank you, Chair. As requested at the previous committee, the report in front of you is presenting the monthly financial monitoring report that was presented to Cabinet on the 6th of September. The report itself just gives a predicted financial position, general fund, housing revenue account, also provides an update on capital expenditure to date, and also to cover off treasury management. There's details in there, returns, predicted returns, and also there's a statement on the portfolio that we hold. At the very highest level, in terms of summary, the report is indicating that the general fund, along with the HRA balances, are being maintained within the agreed levels for those areas. We as the finance team are currently working on preparing for month 6, working with budget managers, etc. So that report is going to be going to November Cabinet, and again we'll be then bringing it to your committee following that. That's a brief introduction to the report, Chair. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Oscar. I'm very great at Cabinet, so nothing really jumped out to me, and I can sort of see nodding heads around the room. So are members happy to note this item?
Yeah.
I did have one.
Sorry.
I'm happy with the item. I'm just conscious that there was a bit of a discussion in Cabinet about whether it was appropriate for those reports to go there first, as opposed to here. I don't remember exactly what was said, even though I was there.
I guess my view would be we sit obviously not parallel to Cabinet, but we don't report to Cabinet, so we do sit outside it intentionally so that we can bypass Cabinet when we need to. So we report direct to Council in the same way it does. So I think I'm not sure the timing necessarily matters. Obviously they've got probably a different focus on it to the way we do. And as long as I think both have looked at it, probably achieves the correct purpose. Sounded unbelievable then, didn't I? But yeah, but no, thanks for the point. I think we've attempted to note that item, so then we'll move on to agenda item 11, the forward plan, and I will, as always, hand over to Amanda.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just asking everyone that's on the forward plan for November if you're happy with that timetable, if you want to move anything add to it. So, something from Simon and swap and comfort for the people that are actually in the group at the moment.
So I think we just said we would have auditors annual report in November.
That replace any of the
Audit, that probably replaces the item we've got there.
Yeah,
So
so
we'll-
auditors annual. Thank you,
and that's
Jackson.
21,
22.
Thank you. Has anybody got any other comments on the forward plan, or otherwise members happy to note? Thank you. That's a nod of approval. I'll take that.
Yes.
And that will bring our meeting to an end, and I'd like to thank everybody for taking part.